Now, live from Tampa, Florida, the 2012 Republican National Convention with Brian and Brian, sponsored by the Media Research Center. 105.9 FM and AM 630. WMAL.
Well, good morning, everybody. It is 6:36 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. It's Brian Wilson and Brian Neiman coming to you live from Tampa, Florida, where the GOP, the grand old party, is gathering for its convention. There will be no real official activities today. They'll open the session with the gavel, but then immediately close it. They did that, made that decision a couple of days ago because the weather looked threatening. As it looks right now, the worst of the weather that we are going to be feeling from the effects of the tropical storm Isaac are going to be pushing through the area through the morning, and it looks like this afternoon things will look pretty nice. But nonetheless, they made the call to do it, and the real activity will start tomorrow. On the line right now is 17-year-old Evan Draim. Now, Evan Draim is going to be a delegate from the Commonwealth of Virginia. Evan, you're not even old enough to vote. How does this work?
Well, first, thank you for having me today.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to be 18 by the next general election, which is obviously in November. Because I turned 18 before the general election, I'm able to vote in any primary election that deals with that general election, and also to be a delegate to my party's convention.
Now, there weren't many slots open, right?
There were not. I was elected in my district, the 8th Congressional District, to represent my constituents there to Tampa. And I was elected at the district convention in May. I had to run a campaign for a few months, reaching out to voters in my district and letting them know that I wanted to bring a unique perspective to the Republican Party. And I was happy that they elected me in May at that district convention, and I was able to win with the top number of votes.
And you actually beat out the Arlington County Republican Committee chairman, didn't you?
Yes. Well, being from the 8th District, which is so close to D.C., there are a lot of established Republicans which really want to get the delegate slot and go down to Tampa. A lot of them feel that it's their responsibility or that it's their entitlement after being in the party for so many years. So that was a preconceived notion that I was kind of coming up against as a younger person running for delegate, and I was happy that the Republican Party and Republican voters really listened to what I had to say despite my young age and really took me in and treated me like an adult.
We're talking with Evan Draim, 17-year-old, a rising senior. He's going to be the youngest delegate here at the Republican National Convention in Tampa. So what are you actually supposed to do? What is a delegate's job duty? Yeah,
well, the delegate has official duties to really vote on our presidential and vice presidential nominees and party platform. So I'll be obviously participating in the nomination of Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, and also in the acceptance of our Republican Party platform. But in addition to that, I think the overall duties of a delegate are representing the party for 1 week. So voters look to the delegates to see who comprises the Republican Party and what is our message going forward into the general election in November. So the fact that the Republican Party chose a student and a younger voter to go down to Tampa and convey that message, I think is a great signal heading into this next election, where I think conservatives and Republicans have an opportunity to really make inroads in the youth vote.
All right, I want to talk about you for a second. How did you get involved in this? Why are you so into politics at the age of 17?
Yeah, well, I've been involved in politics for a few years now, and I really attribute that to my family background. Having immigrants or having relatives who came over to the United States as immigrants to create a better life for their descendants, which would obviously be myself, has encouraged me to get involved in politics in order to preserve the American dream that my grandparents fought so hard to win for me.
But I heard that your parents aren't necessarily really all that political, and that you actually were dragging them around to events.
Yeah, that's true. My parents have been very supportive of all my political activities, but they didn't really start out engaged in politics themselves. My dad took me to my first political convention when I was in 8th grade in Richmond as part of kind of my graduation present from middle school.
Right.
So they've always been very supportive of me, but this has been something that I've gotten interested in and done on my own because I really do think it's important, that I give back to the country that's given my family so much. This is my way of kind of showing how grateful I am to the United States, and also making sure that the sacrifices of my ancestors were not in vain, and I'm living out the American dream that they wanted me to.
You know, we hear when you talk about young people in this election, we hear two things. Number one, that surprisingly, a lot more of them have become more conservative since the last presidential election. And secondly, that they probably will not be as motivated to vote this time around. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think, again, a lot of young people have become more conservative because this idea that young people can support a larger government and think, well, we're not paying for it because we're not paying taxes yet, or because we haven't graduated from school. There have been holes poked into that argument by the $16 trillion debt that young people now know will be levied upon them in years to come. Because of that rising deficit, young voters now know that an expansive government, the costs of that are being put on their shoulders, and so it's time for us to get the wasteful spending and out-of-control growth of government in Washington, D.C. under control. And I think a lot of younger voters are apathetic coming into 2012 because the first time that they cast their vote in 2008, they were voting for a candidate that promised them a more positive future, and they were very optimistic about that future. And now that candidate, Barack Obama, has brought younger voters a 12.7% youth unemployment rate. Half of recent college graduates are being forced to move back in with their parents. And I think a lot of them feel that their individuality is being threatened by Obama's governing philosophy, which places more faith in the federal government than the private citizen. And so after they cast their first vote for that candidate, a lot of them feel disenfranchised with the political system and feel what's the point in getting involved and getting engaged behind another candidate when he disappointed us so heavily. So I'm trying to say, I
have a feeling this is a young man whose name we're going to hear again. What do you think, Mr. Neal?
I think so. Very impressive at the age. So you're going to be going into your senior year of high school, right? What high school do you go to?
I go to St. Stephen's and St. Agnes High School in Alexandria.
So are you missing school this week, or does it start next week? How does that work for you?
Yeah, well, actually, if the Republican Party had been the party in power, we would have had our convention next week where the Democrats are having theirs, and then I would have missed some school. Okay. But because the Republican Party has their convention the week earlier this year, I'm able to both do this and get to school on time so I can tell all my friends about this experience.
Good for you. Hey, before we let you go, we have less than a minute. I mean, you obviously know Virginia politics very well. You went around knocking on doors. What is it going to take, and how tight do you think it is going to be in Virginia for Mitt Romney and George Allen?
Well, I think Mitt Romney and George Allen will both pull it off in Virginia. As Tip O'Neill said, all politics is local, and I think Barack Obama and Tim Kaine aren't really representing Virginia values. And one example of that is Obama's recent decision to kind of keep Virginia from drilling off our coast. Obviously, Governor McDonnell wanted to use royalties for education and transportation, and whether you're Republican or Democrat, I think you can realize that that's obviously a beneficial thing for our state to be able to put more money towards getting Virginian students to college and also being able to drive around the district more easily. So I think that the fact that people should be voting according to their daily lives and which candidate is going to have an impact on their daily lives, I think for Virginians, Mitt Romney and George Allen really represent our values, and regardless of how they voted in the past, I think Virginians will elect Mitt Romney and George Allen in 2012.
Right. Evan Draim, you're a very impressive young man. Have fun down here as the youngest delegate at the Republican National Convention.